And welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Smith with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Very excited to have you with us today. It's the tasting panel experience. So, this is a big deal for us. We're really excited. This is the Tasting Panel Experience 2020. This started last year, where myself and Charlie Maclean did a great airport tour of the United States and went around to several cities to meet with members and allow them to be a part of a tasting panel and really get that full experience with the original chairman, Charlie himself. So that was 2019. Fast forward to 2020, October, and things are slightly different. So while we cannot be with you in person, we are certainly with you in spirit. And today we're going to do things a little differently with this tasting panel experience. But first, what is the tasting panel for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society? Some of you may have that question, those of you newer to the membership. So our tasting panel is a group of tastemakers, industry professionals who get together weekly and assess samples from our warehouse to decide whether or not they are in fact ready for our membership to enjoy at home. So these guys get together, they taste everything first neat and then diluted. They discuss along the way, they write down their tasting notes. And for each tasting panel experience, there is a tasting chair, one person who kind of runs the group and at the end collects the tasting notes and finally decides what that title and tasting note is going to be for each of these casks. So today we're going to have a very special chair to lead us through it, and we'll bring him on in just a minute. But the tasting panel to many of our members is one of the coolest parts of this for them, and many obviously dream to go to the vaults and to possibly be on a tasting panel. I think that there are a handful of members going back to the 90s that have actually sat in on a tasting panel or two. But that dream can't quite be realized yet, but I'm certain that will happen for many of you. And most importantly, I think it provides a vetting of sorts for all of these casks that are coming out each month. You can rest assured as a member that this particular cask has been tasted and approved by some very special palates. The rigorous testing that we do to make sure our tasting panel participants are on that level is pretty extraordinary, and the result is amazing whiskey that everyone enjoys month in and month out. So that's a quick background. So 2020, we cannot bring you guys all into a space in the different cities, so it's a bit of a representation of sorts. So I am going to bring in my colleagues here, Mr. Ben Diedrich and Miss Jenna Eli, and we three are going to represent the United States chapter of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. So are you guys ready?
Well, I've always wanted to be an Olympic athlete, but
yeah. It feels there's an Olympic feel to it, doesn't it?
I do feel
Jenna,
very special.
are you all set? It's 9 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys are excited to get going here?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Ready to go.
What? You need like a jersey or something, Ben? Was that?
No, I'm sorry, Jenna. No, Jenna. Jenna, we're marketing it so early for you, but probably the best time to taste whiskey. I mean, you have the advantage of the perfect palate. So
it is.
That's right.
I'm excited.
Yep. Great. So we are, in essence, the tasting panelists, and now all we need is a tasting chair. And it just so happens that our tasting chair is a pretty special fella. He was the original chairman of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society tasting panel back in '92, I believe. And he's written various books, well over a dozen different books on the subject. He is heralded as one of the foremost if not the foremost expert in Scotch whiskey. And it is our very, very distinct pleasure to welcome Mr. Charlie Maclean. Charlie.
You're too kind.
It's been a year.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. And it's a great honor to be invited to guide your panel and to say something about it and to go through the whiskies. What about, you've asked me to say something about myself, which I'm always a bit embarrassed to do, but I have been writing about, researching, and then later assessing quality in whiskey for. Well, I wrote my first job as a commercial copywriter actually in 1981. I was trained as a lawyer and got out of it as soon as I qualified. It was a very dull job. And as a matter of fact, I've been spending the last week and more writing an expert's opinion on a trademark case relating to a Scotch whisky distillery, which I won't divulge. And it's reminded me of just how glad I am to have got out of the law, but also reminded me of the precision of legal documents. I mean, once you can penetrate the verbiage, anyway, so I was trained as a lawyer, but then set up my plate as originally a literary agent in 1977, and then that pretty rapidly became ghostwriting books, and then writing books, Scottish non-fiction being the broad category on the side, and then of course commercial copywriting. And during the 80s, I was lucky enough to be asked to write a large number of documents, promotional mainly, for whiskey companies and brands, and became very, very interested in the subject, which previously, all these books behind me, by the way, are about Scotch whisky. It's probably the largest collection of books about Scotch whisky in the world. These are the tools of my trade, my writing trade, anyway. So by 1988, I didn't have. I like to have a book on the back burner to turn to if the commercial work was slack. I didn't have a book at that time, but I had a considerable interest, and also, dare I say it, a considerable track record in writing about Scotch. So I went to a London publisher with a proposal that was adjusted and then contracted in 1988, published in 1992. And since then, my so-called, what I laughingly call my career, has took a swerve towards Scotch whisky. And yes, as Tom said, I've now published 18 books about Scotch. But more important, actually, in regard to what we're going to be talking about, I did a formal training in what's rather grandly termed the sensory evaluation of Scotch whisky, or rather the sensory evaluation of potable spirits, with what's now the Scotch Whisky Research Institute. This was in 1992 or 3, about then. That changed my life. And so my main areas of interest and the main assistance that I can give to the Scotch whisky industry, because I'm now, if you like, a consultant to the industry broadly, is in relation to the history of Scotch whisky and the sensory evaluation, the assessment of, if you like, assessment of quality, which we'll talk about in a moment or two. So that's about it. In terms of my career, I was the first editor of Whisky magazine, 1998. I was made a keeper of the Quake in 1992, and you've got to have served for 10 years in those days to become a keeper, and then elevated to master in 2007, and then to my surprise and joy, I was nominated inducted into the Whiskey Hall of Fame. Only the 35th person that had ever been inducted into the Whiskey Hall of Fame. And that's just not Scotch whiskey. That embraces American whiskey and Japanese whiskey and Irish whiskey.
Amazing.
So there aren't that many of us, and so that's broadly speaking my career. Some of you may have seen a film called The Angel's Share by a very famous English director called Ken Loach, in which I played a small part, and as myself, effectively as a whiskey expert. So anyway, that's about it. So I'm basically a writer, but who now, I mean, God, this close down has been a boon for me, actually, because the last year I was abroad 23 times in 17 countries, and 5 times in China, for example.
Wow. Yeah.
And I don't actually like traveling terribly much, but you know,
well, I guess it works for you then, huh?
Yeah, it's a living, and I am passionate about whiskey. I'm not only Scotch. I mean, I'm asked to evaluate and comment on non-Scotch. We call it rather arrogantly non-Scotch, Japanese whiskey, American whiskey, Irish whiskey, etc. I love the people involved. The great thing about this industry that we're all involved in is the people. You know, the people who make whiskey. Whiskey is made with passion, you know, and sold with passion. And you know, I have the highest regard, for example, for bartenders who are generally so knowledgeable about the products that they're using. Not only just whiskey, but all other products they're using in their cocktails or whatever it is. And the same is true with the people that make whiskey, drink whiskey. It's extraordinary that as I'm sure you're all aware, there are literally hundreds of whiskey shows around the world, whiskey fairs, usually lasting a couple of days, and often attracting 5,000 people, 2,000 to 5,000. Do you know? All over the world. I know of about 12 in Germany. I know of about the same number in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
In Scandinavia, Sweden in particular, there are 30, 40. Do you know? Taiwan.
Well, they have to keep warm up there, you know?
Sorry?
So they have to keep warm up there, you know, and they just got to.
Yeah. But Asia, you know, I mean, earlier this year I was in New Zealand for Dramfest, which has been running now for about 10 years. It's a great fair. I mean, all over the world, America, Canada.
And so now these have all essentially ceased during the.
They've had to. They've had to during this lockdown period. No travel.
Have you seen the pivot from obviously in person to virtual, like we've experienced at the Society? Have you seen this elsewhere with different festivals sort of going for?
Well, yes.
Feel?
There was one last week, for example, Tom, that there's a very good fair in London run by the Whisky Exchange. Well, I can't remember what its title is, and they ran it for a week, and they had numerous. I was involved in some, but they had numerous, you know, tastings, online discussions, talks, etc. So yeah, the medium has been adopted,
right?
You know, and it's better than nothing, but it's not exactly the same as sharing the juice with people round the table.
Absolutely, I think we all feel that to an extent. Yeah. I think we're all doing our best to share as much as possible in this new medium. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, we've embarked here. We're just getting warmed up with the tasting panel experience, where Ben, Jenna, and myself are essentially the junior members of the tasting panel today, and we're representing our members, the members around the country, to help choose these these very special casks for next year. So Charlie, just before we hop into the whiskey, you've given us a good bit about your experience leading up to your involvement in Scotch whiskey. What about the society? How did you get started? Were you a member first, and then you sort of kind of sipped your way up the ranks, or how did that work?
Yeah, fun enough, I joined about 83, pretty early on, and but then I allowed my membership to lapse, and then I was very friendly with Richard Gordon, who in the late 80s he worked for Glenmorangie, and he was looking for I introduced him anyway to the society, the Malt Whisky Society, and ultimately he was appointed managing director of the society, and that would be in about 93, and he brought me in. We had both sat on that same very exclusive. I think there were only 8 people on this course in sensory evaluation, and so he brought me in to chair the nosing panel and to brace it up. It had been in a pretty random way before that. They were very exotic tasting notes, but they weren't necessarily fixed in reality, And he wanted to keep my instructions were to keep the slightly porky, humorous tone of the notes for which the society is famous,
right?
But to ground it in some kind of objectivity. When you're running a panel or writing a tasting note, it's a balance of subjective and objective. The guys who are doing quality assessment for not writing notes for the whiskey companies, they are trained and to be totally objective. I mean, to give you an example, Diageo were the biggest producer. They own 28 distilleries, malt distilleries, and all samples from every batch of their distillate is sent to a lab in Elgin and examined, assessed for quality by a panel. The panel is I think there's about 10 people who are available, and at least 5 have to look at, in their own time, these samples are set up, the new make spirit, white spirit, in a wee lab, barcoded, so that they don't know which ones they are. They nose, they don't taste, of course, but they nose the spirit, and they hit a number. And on the wall behind them is a 14 descriptors, simple descriptors like, floral, fruity, peaty, waxy, meaty, sulfury, green, very simple words. And all their 28 distilleries are required to make spirit which has the character that they are required to make. The most obvious example, there's only one that has to make waxy, and that is, you might like to guess, Clynelish. Clynelish makes waxy spirit, and it comes right through.
Or distillery number 26.
We're not tasting that this evening, or this afternoon with you. And so there are some big meaty ones like Mortlach, Dal Ewan, I think Ben Rinnes, etc. But they do it all blind, and then the computer crunches up the assessment from the 5 people that week who have looked at all these samples. And if any distillery is not on character, on spirit character, they get a telephone call, and they get their ass kicked. Why aren't you on character this week? What's happened? And but this is an analytical panel. It's called an analytical panel. It's entirely objective. They try and be as objective as possible. They're trained. The noses are trained and assessed, and indeed continually assessed. The sort of subjective panels, also called hedonic, as in hedonism, the sort of things that we are talking about here in the society, more relaxed, that we don't have to be professionals. We don't have any constraint on the language that we use. Indeed, I mean, I would encourage the society panels to be as exuberant as they possibly can. To smell, most of the assessment is done by the nose, and smell is very, very closely associated with memory and emotion. Indeed, that part of the brain which identifies smells, odors, it's called the olfactory. The little bud that gathers the odors is called the olfactory epithelium, and that plugs into a part of the brain which I think is called the limbic system of the brain, which in fact is the oldest part of our brain. Indeed, it's so old that it's called paleomammalian. It formed when we were still reptiles, before we even became animals, you know. It's terribly, terribly ancient. And it's also the seat of long-term memory and of emotion. And so smells can generate the most extraordinary memories, and also sometimes, you know, very emotional memories. Although underused in daily life, smell is what's our least used and least understood sense, you know. But all these things work together, and so in a hedonic, in a subjective panel, I encourage people to, and I will be encouraging you to say, if the smell reminds you of anything, takes you into some sort of, it's not only from your own personal experience, but, you know, indeed, it's the interesting thing is that you can imagine, you know, one might smell something and it takes you to a bazaar in Istanbul, you know. Well, I've never been in a bazaar in Istanbul, but you can, with the exotic smells and a bit of rotting fruit and some, you know, goats and what have you, you can imagine in the situation, and that's perfectly legitimate, you know. So it's an indication. It's a very personal indication.
That's a great sort of segue now to getting tasting, because I think
I've gone on.
Ben and Jenna and I are like chomping at the bit to get subjective, to get emotional, and you know, ourselves to American Bazaar for sure. So for those of you who are watching, obviously you can't taste these with us, and we do apologize for that, but you could taste something. So if you haven't already poured a dram, shame on you wherever you are, and please grab a glass and pour a dram, and let's get into our first whiskey, I think. So you'll notice, folks, there's going to be sort of a ticker going across the bottom of the screen with the information. And your first sample that you're going to see is sample number 7, which may seem a little strange considering it's the first sample we're tasting today. So these samples, starting in 2019 with samples 1 through 6, will all be kept sort of in the same bucket, if you will, since they are all tasting panel experience from year to year to year. So while last year we tasted samples 1 through 6, this year we're tasting samples 7 through 12. And keep in mind that these are indeed samples. These have not been given a cask number yet. So while we do know the distillery number, we do not know the cask number. These are essentially straight out of the barrel, and you know, ready to sample that way. So a very raw sort of situation here. Ben, I think you have the bottles. Can you hold up maybe one of the labels?
Yeah, and just to show, should we maybe?
There you go.
I mean, these are pure. You just came from overseas. We have them all here. On it, we'll display the cask information at the bottom of the screen as we're tasting them together. But it just has all the specs here, from date of distillation, date that the sample was drawn. Of course, these casks are still maturing in the warehouse. This was just extracted from them. They haven't been bottled yet, and I guess the votes of the members will ultimately determine which ones are going to be bottled. So it's possible some of these may continue to rest for a few more years.
Right.
We don't know yet. But yeah, they're all very raw, complete with the lovely, elegant society special top. Call that whatever you want for a bottle. I'll let you leave that up to you. But
Don't want any leakers.
it's protection. So
I've just got to open the door. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, sure, Charlie. So Charlie's got to open the door, and we're gonna plug along here. Oh, thanks, there. That's great. So we have 6 different samples to go through. We are gonna taste neat, nose and taste neat, nose and taste diluted, and kind of discuss each of these as we go through. So while that may not provide the best theater for everybody, we hope. I certainly know that Ben and Jenna are going to be very, very entertaining. And, too bad Charlie's so, mellow.
Sorry.
All right, you ready? You ready, man? All right.
Yeah. Right. Now, let me first of all talk you through the procedure. Okay. The procedure is quite simple, really. We look at the appearance of the whiskey, we look at the aroma of the whiskey, and then we taste the whiskey. We always smell before we taste. Okay. And indeed, blenders and people who are working with large amounts of whiskey all the time, they never need to put it in their mouths. We, of course, to advise the members, have to put it in our mouths, although we might spit. At a panel, we would spit. Well, depends how good the whiskey is, to be honest. So the first thing, the appearance, is first color. Now, color is all society's whiskies are at both natural strength. They're bottled at the natural strength at which it comes out of the cask, and they're also bottled without any coloration. Now, most even malt whiskies, they are tinted, as it's called, with spirit caramel to adjust the color, really for consistency from batch to batch. It's simple as that. It's undesirable. I've done experiments with spirit caramel, and it doesn't affect the taste at all, but it does mean that you cannot have any idea about what kind of wood whether it's a European oak or American oak, whether it's a sherry butt or a bourbon, ex-bourbon cask. But anyway, these are natural color, what they call natural color, and I would describe this just as gold. It's a sort of mid-gold, 9-carat gold. To be a bit romantic, it's probably sort of pale sunlight, something like that. Second aspect of appearance, which I find very, very useful, is called the beading test. And if you take, I've got a sample bottle here. This is the one we're looking at. If you shake it, you see it foams up. Oh, you see the little black bits. That indicates that it's come from a charred American oak cask. Now you see that bead isn't holding terribly well. But what the bead tells you is it foams like that. It tells you, if you're looking at it strictly blind, it tells you that it's over 50% alcohol. You do not get a bead. Do you wonder if I've got a bottle that's handy that is no? You don't get a bead. And then in some of the whiskies we'll look at later on, will the bead lingers on the surface of the liquid, and this was always thought to be a good sign, because it tells you that it's high strength. Looking at it blind. B, it tells you if the bubbles linger, that it's got a certain amount of mouthfeel texture. We'll discuss that later on. So this is will be numbered by the society, I think 13, Tom, isn't it?
That's right. Distillery number 13 is our first sample.
Yeah, I'm not telling you what it is. It's at the sample I have is at 63.86, I think. Yeah, it's 63.86% alcohol by volume, and it's a first fill barrel. So an American barrel, ASB, American Standard barrel, and that. So it's been seasoned with bourbon, and now it's come into the Scotch whisky system. So now, the next stage is to look at the aroma. First point in aroma is called the nose feel effect. The nose feel effect, it might be, well, the obvious one is prickle. And this, when I was nosing it the other day, was considerably prickly. It's not as prickly now, to be honest, but it's got a degree of prickle, which we will try and take off in a moment or two when we add water. I always suggest that you should add enough water to take off any prickle. Water is always a good idea with whiskey. First, because it opens up the aroma. We'll talk about this in a moment, but and second, because perhaps more important, it makes it much easier to hold in the mouth when you're tasting it. So, what are we getting here, guys?
So I think if you guys don't mind, I'll just jump in here with some notes that I'm picking up on this is the note, the nose neat. So undiluted. I'm getting a bit of taffy that you might get at at a seaside fair. Closest to me would be Coney Island. But sort of, like a taffy of sorts. Maybe it's not quite banana, maybe like a pineapple taffy. I'm getting a touch of cereal note along with maybe like a furniture polish or new wood type feel. So those were kind of my first notions, but then I went back again. Underneath that, salty sea air, like kind of maritime air. If you're breathing it in deeply on the ocean, some kind of stone fruit, tropical peach is kind of what I picked up, and a bit of honeyed character. Jenna, how about you?
So for me, right off the bat, like the first few times that I really kind of had my nose in this glass, I got like an underbaked peach pear tart with like a slight mintiness to it. I'm not sure what that is, but I keep getting this like beautiful, just like very crisp, refreshing, almost mint quality. And it kind of all is surrounded by that very slightly salty ocean air. It's very subtle, but there is definitely like a baked fruit element to this. So I'm just imagining sitting on the seaside and that cold air is just all around, and I'm eating a baked, fruit tart of some sort. So that's where I'm at.
Ben?
Love it.
I mean, I think my first impression, it's always fascinating to smell nose a whiskey yourself and then hear others talk about the same whiskey.
Yeah.
Completely has changed my opinion of it, or at least my observations. For me, I got a really heavy aroma, sort of like a lemon seed oil, or like a kaffir lime. It has this very sort of Southeast Asian sort of exotic character. I didn't pick up the sort of coastal nature of the spirit until I think you, Tom, and Jenna mentioned that. And now I get more like a salty, buttered bread type of aroma with it. So it's just interesting how my first observation has changed just in hearing you two share your opinions. But I keep going back to the sort of the lemon and the citrus zest that was there before.
Nice. And it's always fun to nose a whiskey that we typically see really inundated with sherry, and kind of getting more of a raw, ex-bourbon expression from it. But Charlie, whip us into shape here.
This is fascinating. Yeah, I agree with Ben that there's always a degree of autosuggestion, but it's always very useful to listen to a panel, because I was not my first. I'm looking at my notes here from yesterday. it was bruised apples, then green apples, and that freshness that you. But I mean, Jenna, your peach pear tart and minty. Now I missed the minty yesterday, but there is a freshness to it. There's a lovely fresh, crisp note to this. And when I first noticed it, it seemed like bruised apples, but then it went into green apples. But that's all. Then, if you like bruised apples, which would be similar to an apple tart or a French apple tart, but then it had this freshness. Then I got very briefly a sort of fragrant, almost floral note, but I'm not getting it now. Although it does need, it is quite prickly. It will benefit from water, certainly enough to. So I'm going to put a little drop of water in, and then.
Do we want to taste it neat first, Charlie?
Oh yeah, you can do. It's quite hot. It's smooth, sweet, and a very spicy finish.
Yeah, just very quickly on the palate, neat. I'm getting some golden pear, kind of really ripe golden pear immediately. Good hit of white pepper spice in the mid palate. Yeah. That's probably from the heat, but certainly a pepper spice versus a cabinet spice.
Yeah.
And then on the finish there, some nice kind of almost like a white flower honeysuckle type softness to it, but still a good amount of sweetness.
Yeah.
It really is hot, though. I mean, it's difficult to pick out anything beyond, the alcoholic, undertone. Like it's just so dominant.
Yeah, it really does benefit from a drop of water.
Charlie, as we're going into the diluted palate, could you just make a quick mention on the type of glassware we should all be using?
Well, the key thing, Tom, is that because so much of the assessment for appreciation is done by the nose, the standard the standard tumbler, the old-fashioned glass, is absolutely hopeless for displaying the aroma. So it's a great drinking glass, drinking long, invented originally for brandy and soda, and then adopted by blended Scotch for whiskey and soda. Great as such, old-fashioned glass, and old-fashioned cocktail, etc., etc. But when you're doing an assessment like we are, you need a glass where the rim narrows so as to direct the aroma up your nose. This is called a spirits nosing glass. It's like a sherry capita. The more standard one, which is very, very good, is the Glencairn glass, which is universally available. But frankly, a white wine glass is it's just a glass where the rim narrows slightly so as to concentrate the aroma. It is very. I'm glad you mentioned that, Tom, because it's very, very important for appreciation. I mean, to serve a fine malt whiskey in a tumbler, well, it's a drinking glass, but right. You cannot really evaluate and assess the quality of the whiskey in such a glass.
And then a quick question while we're paused here. A quick question from Gregor. He says, Charlie, thoughts on tipping out the dram to a new glass and nosing the dram remnants as a technique?
Why tip it out into a new glass? The interesting thing is there's a phenomenon called aroma development, and some whiskies, if you leave, so you finish the whiskey but don't clean the glass and go back to it after, say, half an hour, and you'll still pick up, the rudiments, and sometimes the aromas will last for hours. Indeed, in some cases, the taste will linger for hours. I remember once there was a very famous whiskey produced by White Mackay for Dalmore. It was what was it? oh God, I can't remember. I can't remember. 62 years old, I think it was, and I tasted it with the master blender Richard Patterson, and it was very, very dark. It was very, very intense, and I tasted it, and and it was linger, and he said to me categorically, says, "You will taste that tomorrow morning." And I said to him, "Richard, for goodness sake, we're going to have lunch. I'll go back to Edinburgh. This is in Glasgow, and I'll go back to Edinburgh, and I'll have my supper. I'll brush my teeth and have a night's sleep." But by God, I could imagine. It's rather like having a night on tequila, which repeats the following morning. I reckon I could still imagine that Dalmore, 62-year-old Dalmore, the following morning. So the empty glass is it's very evocative, actually. But I mean, there's no point. You don't need to transfer the contents into a fresh glass. Just leave the glass that you've been using and having emptied it.
Great. Thank you. So okay, so on the diluted nose now, we've added. I mean, I've successfully gotten rid of my prickle, I think.
Yep. Good. That's a good thing to do.
So again, for those watching, it's really just to make sure that you're not feeling that heat on your nostrils any longer. Then you're essentially diluting to your own palate.
Yeah.
Is that right, Charlie? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To your own. There's no. The interesting thing is that blenders, they tend to operate at around about 22% alcohol, between 22% and 25%, and the which I find a bit low, to be honest. But that's the kind of industry standard, and oh God, I've lost what's happening with my screen. It's gone funny.
You still look good.
No, there we are. I'm back.
Yep.
So that's what I say. It's entirely up to you. And as we go on through this tasting, and we will speed up, by the way. This is the introductory one. It's always the slow one. But as we go through, you find that your palate can cope with whiskey at higher strength. You need less water to take off prickle or to. So it is entirely up to you. And especially Jenna, at 9 o'clock in the morning, feel free to add plenty of water.
I added 3 drops, just from my little water dropper, and
good for you,
yeah, I found that I didn't find the nose to be super prickly neat, but I found that with just a little bit of water, more of that like lemon, honey,
yes,
a little bit of like hairspray almost kind of came through on the end.
Yep.
And the palate turned more into that. I think it's beautiful with water. I think that you get more of those like malty cereal, baked pastry type notes, and like a lemon pepper finish almost.
Yep.
So I definitely.
Splendid. That's a terrific description. I agree with everything you say. It's absolutely splendid. Although I would probably, to go back to my original notes, the only thing is that I would add a dash of vanilla ice cream, and I probably didn't get too much of the pastry cereal notes that you were picking up, and indeed I think Tom was picking up as well. But otherwise, I agree 100% with what you say. It's a very good description.
Yeah, for me, any of that cereal dissipated with the dilution, and certainly the citrus. Maybe it's a product of the power of suggestion, but all of a sudden I was getting all these sort of stewed fruits or bruised fruits coming out. Very very ripe orchard fruits, along with that freshness remained for sure. That salinity, that kind of sea air, if you will. Remained, but yeah, it became very, very pretty on the nose. It was fairly bruising on the undiluted, but with the addition of water, it really turned.
I agree.
Secret for sure.
One thing I would say about the taste at reduced strength the saline character comes through even more, and the acidity, the fresh acidity, comes through.
Yeah.
It's a very nice dram. It is. The spiciness remains, but at a more tolerable level.
Right. Yeah. Ben, any parting thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild spirit. Like, it's very 13 years old. I think it tastes all of it. You know, it's definitely better with water, in my opinion. I mean, I think for me, I agree with Jenna, a lot of your points and your observations of the spirit as it evolves with water. I pick up a lot of char. Like, it's I guess more of the wood characteristics have come through with the dilution. It's wild. But it's also friendly. Just to talk about the character, it's a friendly dram. You know, it's sort of an afternoon, or in this case, if you're like Jenna in California, it's not
different time zone.
Breakfast whiskey.
I think I think of like very fruity desserts, and Jenna, I'll defer that to you because you're the baking expert here. But it's not an evening dram. Sort of at the end of the day, it's again the fresh and vibrant character, I think, sets it apart from maybe some others we'll be tasting. So it's
great.
fun, you know?
Very good, very good. Okay, let's get on to number 2.
All right.
Now this is number 105 in the list of the SMWS list, because, as you know, we don't reveal the names of the distilleries, really out of courtesy to the distillery owners. That was the original idea behind it. I think that actually the numbers and the associated distilleries are online now, but the society, it's fun really. People can guess, and we can, in our tasting notes, we give a guarded, it's a guide to what it might be, so members can guess, if you like. But so I'm not going to tell you what this one is. It's a Speyside whiskey. It was distilled in 1992, so bottled at 28 years old, a refill barrel, so again an ASB, the American Standard Barrel, ex-bourbon refill. The sample I have in front of me is at 46.8% alcohol. It's got a good deep color, goldy sort of color. Look at the beading. But you see the char. You see the char flying around. That's typical ASB. It's really quite a light beading. It's rather surprising. Of course, the strength is under 50%. That's right. The strength in my bottle here is 46.8. I think I mentioned, and so it's really not beading. You don't get a bead unless it's above 50. So here we are. Now then, so again, we look at the appearance, the color, where we looked at the beading, gold. Again, typical American oak. This golden color comes from American oak. The darker colors tend to come from Spanish oak, European oak. Quercus roba in the second case, Quercus alba in the first, the Latin for the species of oak. And then you don't find it in Scotch, but you get Quercus mongolica, which is the Japanese oak. And there are 3 or 4 or 5. There are hundreds of species of oak, but there are only 3 or 4 that are used by winemakers and distillers. Now, this one really surprised me. I'm not going to say anything about it. The bottle, it was faintly cloudy, but it's bright in the glass. So the gold is a dull sort of gold. But now, see what you think of the. I'd love to hear your comments.
The nose. May I start? The nose is like absolutely mesmerizing. I mean, this is a really, really cool nose. I'm getting I'm getting a lot of fruit. I mean, not like the, I don't know, maybe not like more of the citrus stone fruit that I typically eat, but more exotics like kiwi, like mango. Then I go back to it, and it's more like kind of like wild strawberry, those little tiny strawberries that you pick off the, out of the woods or whatever. And then a sort of white confection. Is it vanilla? It's more like a marshmallow to me. Do you guys have marshmallows? Yeah.
I
mean, but something like that. So those are my initial impressions on the neat nose. Jenna?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I find on some rye whiskeys, I get this kind of weird marshmallow note. I don't find this to be spicy, but I definitely get that little tinge of that marshmallowy kind of bit. But when I was not expecting this at all. And to me, it tastes like if you took some vanilla custard and some Vaseline and you mix those two things together. It is waxy and like it feels like ointment in my nose. Like it is the craziest nose I have smelt in a whiskey in a long time. And I'm so happy over here. And just to know something that is so unique like this is
that's
really a treat, but it's so ointment like on the
texture.
Nose. Yeah, like the nose has texture.
Right.
So there we are.
Ben?
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is so evolved, the spirit. I mean, 28 years in oak has really done wonders, I think, for the spirit. Tom, it's fun. I was reaching back and grabbed something because you mentioned that it's mesmerizing, right? And I was thinking that we don't often see cask from Distillery 105, but the last one, or one of the most recent ones we released, was called
Truly Mesmerizing.
Interesting that you said that. This is also a 1990 distillate from a refill barrel. It's 26 years when we bottled it, which was a couple of years ago, and now here we are with a similar cask, different distillation date.
I remember showing that. That was that was January of 2019 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So
that was a while ago.
But anyway, it was just funny that you said it was mesmerizing. That was the name of this.
Oh wow.
I think it's a beautiful spirit. It is unique. It's like a very creamy texture that I agree with Jenny. You can pick up just by nosing in some spirits, and this is one that it alludes to the creaminess of the spirit even before tasting. I think it's phenomenal. And maybe Charlie, I'll defer to you, but just to speak of what the sort of evolution that takes place over time. For me, it smells like an older whiskey. And there's something about that. I think it's fantastic, just on the nose alone.
Well, I must say I was somewhat disappointed by it. Very, 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 very mellow, obviously, as you'd expect at this relatively low strength. I love and wholly agree with your comments about marshmallows. I have it down as manila envelopes and wallpaper paste, but it's got this sort of pasty top aroma, but that does evolve after a little while. It gains a sort of fruitiness. So I agree with Tom, you were saying, exotic fruits. I've got here, ripe apricot.
Sure, absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's there's a sort of ripeness to it, which would key with what you were saying, Ben, about the aged character. It isn't. It is displaying its age, and which is frankly what you want. I mean, it's a lovely whiskey, but it's a bit tired. And in my view, and I've got a note of creamy coffee. No, you said there was a creamy note, Ben, and so it was like a sort of. I'm not getting it now, but it was. I had a sort of like a cappuccino, sort of creamy, or actually more like a creamy, not frothed, but a creamy coffee. Anyway, taste.
I feel like for for as old as the nose, or as I should say not old, but mature, as the nose smells to me, the palate is actually pretty youthful. I think it pops with a lot of the tropical fruits. I get juicy fruit gum in the mid palate. And then like a little bit of herbaceousness, a little bit of spice on the finish. The finish is a bit short, to be fair, but we're all used to flying at an altitude of like 60% alcohol, so there's that. Jenna?
I agree with you 100% on the juicy fruit. It's not as viscous or as textured as the nose kind of makes you believe that it will be. I don't think the nose and palate match on this, but it is tropical. It is juicy. It is that juicy fruit gum. I'm getting a lot of that kind of pineapple, mango, like star fruit kind of notes. So I think that's spot on. This is juicy fruit and Vaseline all the way.
And marshmallow.
And marshmallows. There you go.
Yeah.
Ben?
Well, it's funny that I was so infatuated by the aroma. And Charlie, you called out, I think correctly, it is a bit tired. But then again, so am I. It's still the morning in my time. And I think after it's such a stark contrast between this first sample that we had, right? And so my experience, the moment I noticed this, I thought, wow, it was welcoming in a different way. The first one was bright and vibrant and sort of attacking the palate. For whatever reason, maybe it's the morning time. Well, it's just crossed the noon hour, so it's acceptable now to drink. But for whatever reason, I was just captivated by that. I agree the finish is a bit short. That's a little disappointing. I would like to see more of that. But I think the complexity between the fruits and the wood and the grain, it's very harmonious, at least on the palate. Would just like to see a bit more.
Yep. I think that my feeling is that it tastes better than it noses. It's not giving terribly much away on the nose, but it's got a very, very interesting taste. I've got it's certainly easy drinking straight. We don't need to add water to this.
I was going to ask, what do we do here when you're faced with a whiskey that doesn't give your nose any prickle? Do you just skip dilution?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I sometimes I feel that I'm required to add a drop of water.
Right.
But it does, very old whiskies, you've got to be very, very careful about adding water. So, I mean, by all means, if you like, but I don't think it's necessary. I mean, water is necessary. The indicators, such as the prickle, etc., suggest water. So it's slightly sweet overall, as you all said. It's got a shortish finish, which is somewhat disappointing. But I was getting the one thing that nobody picked up on was a milk chocolate in the aftertaste.
Mint chocolate.
Milk chocolate.
Oh, milk chocolate. Okay.
Milk chocolate. Yeah, not mint. No, milk. It has got that funny. It's slightly. Now I'm getting it's almost like white chocolate, actually. Milky Bar. White chocolate, or certain milk chocolate, white chocolate in the aftertaste. But
this is such a quaffable whiskey. I mean, I'm sitting here it's very strange to say this about a 28-year-old single malt whiskey, but I mean, I'm just like, this is going down so smoothly and enjoyably for me. Like I mean, interesting. Yeah. The finish might not be a minute and a half long, but wow. I mean, that's really enjoyable to sip on without having to, get your palate fried before you add water.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's very good. Yeah.
Now I'm getting a lingering aftertaste, which might be cottage cheese. It's in the creamy, sort of sour cream. The yogurt, possibly.
Right. Yeah.
It's a very interesting whiskey. Most unusual.
Yeah. It's a nice departure from, kind of the typical kind of big, strong whiskeys that we're so used to. It's a really it's kind of like a little vacation it's a nice little dram.
It's a real talking point. Really, is a talking point. The I mean, I didn't take to it yesterday when I was revisiting it, but I must say I'm feeling much more friendly towards it today. Right, now then, number 3 is the distillery number 30 on the SMWS list. It was distilled in 1997, so it's 23 years old. It was filled for 21 years in an ex-bourbon casks, or an ex-bourbon cask, and then transferred to and these would be refill casks, and then transferred to a first fill, very active Spanish oak hogshead, which had previously contained Pedro Jimenez sherry, which is a very, very sweet, a very intensely sweet Spanish wine. So here we are. We've got a finished whiskey now. Got a lovely dark color. Beading. Oh, there we are. That's like Guinness.
That's a serious bead right there.
That's a good bead, and it's holding the bead, holding. So this is good. This is exceptional now. Yeah, so this is all indicating I like the texture. The color is I've got a deep amber American oak, but then it's been topped with Spanish oak. But Montillado sherry, polished mahogany, lovely color, lovely color. Right, now and so we've got a 23-year-old whiskey. Well, the nose initially is quite closed. Actually, it's not giving much away, but it will hopefully it'll open up. It
is. It's a little difficult to pull things out of there.
Yeah,
I'm finding it a little difficult.
Initially, the so it helps. It helps if you warm it up in the hand. It's interesting that with whiskey, you know how in posh restaurants you'll be offered often a flame to warm your cognac or your armagnac over. This is not done in for some reason. It's not done with whiskey, but we do warm it in the hand. That helps to open it up if you're in a cold room like I am here.
Okay.
No, it is opening. It is opening.
It actually really is.
Now, do you want me to start off, or you start off, John, or Ben? Anybody start off?
Why don't we flip it? Why don't we start with Jenna? Why don't we kick it off with you?
I'm getting balsamic vinegar, dates, and at the very end, little whisker maple syrup.
Love it. Love it.
Ben?
Yeah, I think the balsamic note is finished in PX sherry, which is a sticky sweet style of sherry. But I think Charlie, you said something about Amontillado, and the character is more reminiscent overall of a drier, nuttier Amontillado sherry. A bit of balsamic. I agree. Jen, I think spot on with the dates. Very different from the last whiskey, which is an old sort of straight American oak matured whiskey. This, you can tell there's the sherry sort of masking a little bit. And I agree that it's very compact at full strength. You know, you can tell there's more to pull out.
Well, I'm certainly picking up on a good deal of sort of salted caramel. As far as the fruits are concerned, and I mean that balsamic, you mentioned that, and I definitely feel that popping. But certainly not the fruits aren't quite as dried out as I thought they might be, like, full on dates or prunes, or it's more of like if you were to take some figs and saute them in butter or something.
Love it, Tom. Love it. Let your imagination go wild.
I'm trying, as we taste more of this whiskey, my imagination is running away. So
this would be good on pancakes.
Forgive me. It would be good on pancakes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that takes me back to your maple syrup. I didn't get maple syrup when I tasted it yesterday. I've got it's mellow, but it's still vital. It's not overly prickly. It's my sample is 54.2% in alcohol by volume. But so it's a mellow. So it's 23-year-old whiskey. And as you would hope, it's mellow, but it's still quite lively. Mixed dried fruits I've got with almonds and walnuts and the suggestion of glacier cherries. Christmas cake mix. Gradually a ghost of caramel toffee, Scotch ? So I'm picking up a lot. I didn't get balsamic, and I adore balsamic vinegar, and I think you're absolutely right.
But it's like a reduction, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like a reduction.
Yeah.
A sweeter expression of that. The nuttiness definitely comes through, Ben, like you were saying with that Amontillado. Yeah.
Like candied nuts.
Candied nuts is good as well. Great. Now I'm going to put it. It's got a little bit of prickle, so I'm going to put a wee drop of water in.
I'm gonna try neat just to.
Oh yeah, I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, just on that palate.
What I've got on the palate, lightly oily texture, light acidity, and sweet, finishing sour. A long, warming, pleasantly spicy finish. That's my thoughts on tasting it. That's straight. I've water in the
I'm getting more of those cherries you were speaking of, kind of almost like a maraschino.
Yeah, great. Cool.
I am actually getting a bit of that. If anyone's tried the Luxardo maraschino, that clear spirit neat, you definitely. I'm definitely getting an aspect of that for sure. That's really coming through.
I eat those cherries out of the jar, the Luxardo.
Yes, yeah.
I have them in my fridge right now. Last night I was hungry. What am I going to eat?
They're half the reason I make the Manhattan.
Oh, yeah. When I go to make the Manhattan, they're all gone. So because I just eat them.
But that light, very light. Now we're definitely in the cabinet spice.
Yeah.
Certainly nutmeg, a little cinnamon. Nothing too much more exotic beyond that, but the finish is really long and very pretty.
It is. I was getting more exotic garam masala,
Oh, okay.
more exotic spices in the taste at reduced strength.
Reduced.
Yeah,
okay.
long, warmish and at reduced strength. Yeah.
Okay, we're just getting there.
It's very meaty. It's like a very meaty. Yeah, I find that
Christmas cake.
it makes me think of like a balsamic cherry reduction on like a really nice, or like a medium steak. Like I want to dip like a big fat piece of steak into this and eat it.
I love it.
Yeah, and it has like that kind of subtle sweetness to it. This is just a very meaty, like you could sit with this for a long time.
Yeah, you're right. It is quite big. Mm. All I can say about this distillery is that the spirit it makes is that it can take. They don't usually, but it can take what they call sherrywood maturation. I think, i.e., casks that have been seasoned with sherry, whether it's American oak or European oak, it can take that quite well. Usually, they favour American oak seasoned with Oloroso sherry and the or PX. This is PX, and it takes it very well. And it's not really showing it 23 years, I don't think.
It's pretty youthful. Yeah,
That's maybe a good thing. You know, it's still quite lively. So it's a very nice whiskey. Mm. Right, onwards and upwards. So now
one second. Any guys? Any other comments on the diluted palate?
I don't know if I want to add water to this. I really like it. Like, I think it's such a beautiful experience just the way it is for me personally. That I don't want to taint it.
Well, we have to, because that's the exercise. So,
all right, fine.
Sorry. I mean, listen, when you're drinking on your own, you do whatever you want. You drink out of the tumbler. You never dilute anything. But today, yeah, we do actually have to dilute a little bit. So I apologize for that. But I mean, I'm certainly getting a lot more of the Christmas. So Charlie, in the UK, I don't think we really, in the US, we have fruitcake, which a lot of people, myself included, would consider it like a little, I don't know, just not to my style. The fruit in there is weird. But in the UK, I believe you have something called Christmas pudding, where it's made over several days, if not like a week or so, and you just keep adding more booze to it. Is that correct? Or is that just the booze? Is that just the household I know?
Typically, the Christmas pudding is made about 6 months before Christmas, and it's well laced with booze. Usually, brandy, could be sweet cherry or marsala or something like that, okay. And then put away, and it kind of mature. Well, and then it's cooked. It's steamed. It's a steamed pudding in a bowl.
Well, I'm getting that very much. That Christmas pudding
set aside, and
right. I mean, I think it certainly has elements of, I don't know, just other kind of spirits. I'm also picking up a bit on the oak, like the char of the oak, maybe. I don't know if that's typical for a first fill sherry cask. Ben, any notes there, or do you pick that up, or do you guys get that at all?
I get a lot of it. I mean, I think I have to admit I'm struggling with this one a bit. It really threw me for a loop. I feel like Charlie and I think we might be on two polar opposites. I also might be. We are also a few time zones apart, but it's very savory. The char was really present for me. I couldn't get past that for some reason. I think it's much improved with dilution. Personally, I think the PX character comes through a bit more. I noted the Amontillado, the drier character. I think it's become a bit sweeter and fruitier, a bit more balanced. The oak was very present neat, but I think it's more balanced. I think it's an evening dram. I mean, for me, maybe it's daytime, but with a bit of food, and me, I think it's but it's a tough one to figure out for me, at least.
It's certainly complex, yeah. And I'm even now getting like notes of like root beer or sarsaparilla or something on the palate. It's really, it's really, I mean, it's utterly enjoyable for sure. But yeah, there's a bit to unpack with this one, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I think it's interesting and it's a magnificent whiskey. You mentioned, Ben, what sort of food do you think it would go with? Because it's robust enough to go with. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a great fan of pairing whiskey with food, to be honest. But but with little snack type things, like salami, for example. I think this would probably go with dried meat. I mean, it would be quite, it's sort of over obvious. But given what you were saying, Tom, about the American fruitcakes, maybe not. But it would be quite obvious to pair it with a little bit but a very dense, sort of British Christmas cake,
Yeah.
possibly even that plum pudding, the Christmas pudding, as we call it. Would probably be a bit over the top, but you know what I mean. Does anything occur to either of you, any of you, the
Lightning round, pairing, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get past sort of the Iberian influence. The sherry, pork comes to mind. I mean, it's very Spanish, I think, in sort of characteristic from the PX sherry. So, you know, a pork chop with a bit of like jam, you know, kind of a sweet savory.
I love it.
I love it. You know, but I think Hamoni Iberico. You know, just I think this
Hamoni Iberico. Yeah. Love it.
Or Charlie Chicago deep dish pizza, which I know you're a big fan.
Oh my God! Please don't start with the deep dish pizza.
But I think it's versatile in the sense that it can go with a fruitcake or dessert. But I like the savory note that I'm pulling out of it. It seems like a good pork of some sort.
Jenna, what would you pair this whiskey with?
Agree with Ben. So I can see this with like a nice, warm, like toasted baguette, little bite with some goat cheese, and then that tomato jam that you get in Spain, that delicious. I have a jar of it in the cabinet. It's that you just plop on top. I think that would be. It's a little sweet. It's a little savory, and I think that this would really complement that little bite. So I'm with you.
Charlie, when you and I were touring the U.S., we didn't get south enough, really, to experience some righteous, badass barbecue. I would pair this whiskey with Texas Hill Country smoked brisket.
Oh,
straight brisket, no sauces whatsoever. If the brisket's made correctly, you don't need any sauce. Let's be frank. And the acidity that you still have from this 23-year young whiskey, it's going to cut right through that fat. The smoke is going to play beautifully with the sweetness. Next time you're here, we're going to go to Waco, Texas. There's a little place, our good friends at Balcones Distillery know it well, called Guess Family Barbecue, and they make one of the best briskets I've ever had in my life. So we're going to go there.
Man. Yeah.
Now let's. What do you guys say we move on?
Count in. Yep. That's brilliant.
We move on now. So Unpeated Flight is now finished. We are now. We're now venturing into the peated whiskeys. And someone had asked. I noticed of the questions earlier on in the stream. Someone had asked, of the 6, how many are we choosing? So we are actually, the 4 of us are choosing nothing. We are mere conduits for our members, and we are simply tasting and analyzing. The members are going to choose 3 out of these 6, and that will be available for polling a week from today. We'll be sending out an email to all of our members, and you will be reading the full title and tasting notes. For all 6 of these whiskeys, you'll be able to go back and take a look at this video again with proper timestamps and kind of figure out for yourselves which 3 you want to vote on. And once the polling closes, we'll figure that out, and you guys will be pleasantly surprised in 2021. So,
and this,
as they say.
This is based upon our tasting notes. This panel's tasting notes.
That is correct. It's based on our tasting notes that the 4 of us will put together.
An awesome responsibility.
Yeah. And then the members will vote.
Yeah.
So they will have the last word.
Yeah, great. Okay, well that's fine.
So we're all counting on you, Charlie. Don't let us down. Okay, no pressure.
I'll do my best. So now we're looking at Cask, the distillery number 108, a very obscure Speyside distillery. I mean, never really been bottled by its owners, It has appeared in some independent things, but it's a very unusual whiskey. It was distilled in 2009, bottled at 11 years old from a second fill barrel. So it's an American oak second fill barrel, quite pale in color. Gosh, my sample bottle is much lower, which means I must have enjoyed it quite a lot. But and it's high strength, 11 years, but it's 62.1% alcohol. My bottle. So let's have a look. So the color is very pale. It's a refill. It's a refill cask, a refill barrel, as we know. 200-liter cask, the barrels and hogsheads are 250. 200-liter cask. It's got kind of in daylight. I'm in increasing darkness here, but it's got a slightly pale greenish light, and the beading is, I would describe as moderate, even though it's 62%. 62% alcohol. Yeah, it fades very quickly. I think in fact probably sort of light beading. Now then, let's have a look at it. Yeah, there's a light prickle, but not too much. Now then, again, I'm not going to influence you. Tell me what you smell.
I'm picking up on very, very little peat on the nose. Very, very little peat. I'm getting kind of a bubble gum kind of aspect to it.
Yep.
Along with, oh boy, is this right? I feel weird saying this, but a touch of like ashtray, like I don't know. I'm getting a touch of like an ashtray that's been like rained on or something. Not that I would know. There's a sense of behind that very pronounced kind of bubblegummy character that I'm perceiving. There's a good deal of earthiness. I'm having a tough time pulling that out, but there's something. It's like wet leaves or something like that. Anyway, Jenna.
So I have this thing with whiskey where it really kind of transports me someplace, and this takes me to an airport lounge where people are smoking and I'm eating a bacon and egg breakfast sandwich and drinking orange juice. This has, like the frozen orange juice, like concentrate that you can like get to put in your freezer, and then you just like put it in a thing and like add water and you have orange juice. There's like a tangy citrus element to this, but that like very subtle, like little baby puff of peat makes me think of like bacon, like a subtle bacon and egg sandwich with orange juice. That's what I'm getting.
Wow.
Maybe it's because I'm traveling so much that I just wish I was in an airport eating, a crappy airport breakfast sandwich with orange
Breakfast
juice.
champion.
That's what I'm getting.
Love it.
Citrus,
Love
zesty,
it.
bacony breakfast.
Now, Ben, have you got any thoughts?
I have a very different experience. It just, I think I'm in a weird place. My palate must be in a weird place today, but
I'm checking your biodynamic calendar. Maybe it's like a moon day or a rock day or something.
I don't know of those days, but anyway, but I get this very impression of like a locomotive steam. Like it's in sort of an elevated environment, like taking a train through the Alps or something. Everything is rising. I don't know if you get, it's a weird sensation when you notice this. Everything is rising upward. The smoke is, for me, very gentle. It's sort of a very distant. But I think because it is so faint, you have to sort of go a little bit deeper, and in that, it just lifts me up. So I'm thinking very high altitude, where everything is a bit more difficult to taste and smell up there. But I just get this a fresh green aroma beneath it, and it's malty as well. So a bit different. I didn't get that savory or sort of bacon note. Maybe I'll go when we taste it. I'll pick that up. It's very grassy, very earthy, very gentle. But steam, like a steam room with them.
Someone's asking. Sorry, Lisa and Troy Gregory are asking. Why are Charlie samples different in ABV from the listings on the screen? Great question. And the reason behind that is that these are samples these are not yet bottled, right? So they're still developing in the cask, and the gauging was different at the time that our samples were drawn to be shipped to the US. And it was maybe about a month and a half later that Charlie's samples that he has right now were drawn to be shipped to him for this tasting. So in that time, perhaps there was a bit of a heat wave or whatever, but you did see a bit of a change in the ABV. I mean, nothing too crazy. And the final ABV may actually be different depending on when they actually disgorge these casks. So,
yeah, you're eagle-eyed. You really are. You're eagle-eyed. But you'll notice that the samples that I've received have been fractionally lower, generally fractionally lower than the samples that went to the US, and because the whiskey is continuing to mature and reduce in strength. And as Tom says, the finished, obviously the final bottling strength will be whatever it is when it's
maybe fractionally lower, although it's pretty cool in Scotland right now. So
yeah.
Guys, just a quick update. I'm no longer getting ashtray. I'm just letting you know. It didn't seem right, but
no. I mean, I must say, I'm interested that you weren't picking, because my first impression, not now, I have to say, but when I was tasting it yesterday morning, or nosing yesterday morning, I feel that it is phenolic in the sense that I was thinking of foot baths, carbolic soap, and then a brief just a hint of smoke in the background, smoldering heat. But that's laid on a sort of Speyside sweetness. This is a Speyside whiskey, would you believe? Yeah. I mean, I was struggling with it a bit. I must say it's very pleasant, and I certainly wouldn't have guessed it as a Speyside. I mean, it's most unusual. In fact, I didn't even know that this distillery had ever produced a peated expression, a peated malt.
It's an extremely small fraction of their output. Glenturret Distillery already is, they're only pumping out, 100,000 liters per year, 200,000 liters, something like that. And it's only a few barrels at the end of the day of this peated expression that's coming out. So we're not looking at Glenturret, I don't think. No. I mean, it's from that distillery. Sorry, distillery number 16. But but it's the peated version. It's the peated version of that.
Unless I'm completely wrong, we're looking at a different whiskey.
I'm so sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Because this one, which we can't
I apologize,
is Speyside whiskey, but it's apparently a peated expression which I've never come across, and it's very, very light, which to some extent is a good thing because it's not swamped the Speyside character of the make. But what do you think? What are we getting?
It tastes very green.
Yeah.
Very green, There's a sooty quality to this. So like what I wrote down is just green, sooty, and sweet. There is a sweetness, almost like a...
That sums it up, but on the nose. We're on the nose still.
Oh, we're still on the nose.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm on my second dram.
I know. I was like, wait, I tasted this.
Yeah, we're tasting one of the Distillery number 108.
As you can
That's what
tell,
I'm getting on the palate.
I'm confused.
Undiluted, right?
Yes.
this is the point where it all falls apart.
Right. Sorry, guys. I undid us. I apologize.
You pulled the thread on the sweater. Now it's
Yeah,
just
right.
coming apart.
Well, I'm getting that Speyside sweetness that Charlie was talking about earlier for
For
sure.
sure.
And Jenna, that then it kicks in. It's like honey and like underripe pear or something like that. Like weird, interesting combinations for sure. The sweetness hits first. You have that kind of ashy character throughout.
On my notes from yesterday, Tom, I've got in the development the fruitiness, the sweetness grows on the nose, and I've got brackets gooseberries in syrup. I think there's something kind of the lighting here. I've got candles over here, and they're not doing a terribly good job. But there's something like some fruit and syrup. It's a thick sugar syrup on the nose.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Syrupy sweetness. I could see that. There's almost like a taffy, like simple syrupy sweetness to this.
Yeah. It's not exactly gooseberries, but it's certainly not as cloying as peaches or pears. It's anyway. So I water now, and and that has brought up the Speyside character, which gives a hint of polythene, kind of acetone, nail varnish remover. But there's really very little evidence of smoke on the nose. Right, let's have a taste.
But I am getting and let me know, Charlie, if I'm using this term correctly. I'm getting petrichor. Petrichor is a term that's been coming up on our tasting notes quite a bit. It's kind of the land after a fresh rain.
What is petrichor?
Oh, I'm asking you, as a citizen of the United Kingdom.
I thought it might be an American term.
Oh boy. Okay.
Well, fascinating. Can you when we're next in communication, put it down. I will research.
Absolutely.
I will. A great friend who's a professor of English across the road.
Amazing.
And I'll ask
Charlie Maclean.
if I can't find it.
Anyway, I'm getting this sort of very like fresh after, like walking through a field right after an afternoon downpour or something.
Yeah.
It just again a fresh kind of herbaceous quality.
But there's not much evidence of smoke peating. To be honest, I'm not getting it anyway. I
diluted quite a bit because it did have quite a bit of prickle on the nose for me. So there's a good amount of water in my glass, but
yeah,
I would absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
The peat character is a very faint ash, and actually I'm finally getting a bit of your bacon on the finish, on the very end of the finish, Jenna.
Yeah, I find it sooty, like more sooty than smoky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sooty rather than smoky. Yeah, I've got that sooty. Yeah. That's right. Anyway, the I don't think it's terribly distinguished, but it's interesting. Oh, excuse me, it's something.
We've released a few of the 108s that have been pretty impressive. I know we had one called Pancetta Roulette that I was blown away by that. I enjoyed that so much. So I'm always excited to see these peated 108s come through.
I'm into this one for sure. It's just there's a sense of innocence to it.
Nice.
I mean, it's but there's a coming of age as well, like an aspect. It's the phenols are faint, but it's an interesting stage of its existence. Like if it were to mature a bit longer, probably can be a bit more mellow. Everything's in balance. I think it's well balanced. It's for me, it's the standout so far, which is.
So I feel like the obvious play would be to just simply label this as lightly peated, but it would almost. I mean, I'd almost slap like a young and sprightly flavor profile on this. You know, there's something very energetic about this dram that's really appealing.
I think if it was our first in the lineup, it was our first whiskey, we might have a very different experience. Like the phenolic aspect might stand out more, but I think my palate's beginning it.
It's interesting. Like as a rule of thumb for anybody who tastes, I'm sure. David Blackmore to the rescue. Petrichor, a pleasant smell that frequently accompanies the first rain after a long period of warm, dry weather. David, thank you very much. And that's not too far off from what I was talking about. But that's awesome. But yeah, it would be interesting. Like typically we're trained to do unpeated first, peated second, right? Like you don't want to taste any peated whiskey, because you're going to lose the nuance of the unpeated character, right? But here, this might actually play well at the very beginning of a tasting. Probably today wasn't the best time to experiment for that with that, but maybe at home, if we do end up getting some of this whiskey either through this program or in our standard outturn, it might be something to play around with, because it's one of the most lightly peated whiskeys I've had in a very long time.
Yeah, that's why I'm just suggesting, if members do choose this or vote for this as one of the cask that will bottle, I'm just suggesting that as a fourth whiskey in a tasting, I think a bit of the nuances are lost. But if you were to just sit at home, have a bottle, fresh palate, uncork it,
right,
I bet you'd pick up a lot more. And I think that would be you'd do the whiskey more justice, because I think there's so much going on, and I'm just admitting that my palate, as it's becoming saturated, I think I'm missing out on some of the characteristics that are there. I think it's a lovely whiskey.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think these are great whiskeys if you're trying to get into that peated category. If you're still kind of on the fence of
absolutely
getting into peat, I think these are perfect examples of kind of exposing your palate to what peat can be, because this is more of like a sweet peat. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of like Elsa Bay. It's sweet, it's slightly peaty, it's just got a really just approachable introduction into peated whiskeys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly what I would refer to as a bridging dram from one style to another.
Yeah.
And that's our greatest hope as the folks, working with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society in the US is, of course, we want everyone to identify the whiskeys in our collection that are within their sort of taste preference. But the ultimate hope is that you venture outside of that through and get into different kinds of styles and kind of challenge your palate to different whiskeys. So that's certainly one of them, I think, for those who haven't quite taken the peated leap and might care to. All right. So Charlie, what do you think? Should we go on to sample 11?
Yeah.
Which is our fifth
number 5 this evening. This is a very interesting whiskey, I must say. I was terribly impressed by it. It's called well, I won't say what it's called, but you can give the number. It's number 16, actually, on the Malt Whisky Society's list, which will mean nothing, except members can Google it. It's a 10-year-old whiskey. And it's a peated whiskey. It's the peated version of a a Highland distillery, which has traditionally made non-peated or very, very lightly peated spirit. And my instructions just say it's come from a recharred hogshead. It's quite high strength. It's 63.8% alcohol in in the sample that I've got. It's got a gorgeous. Oh God, Lord, I can't even.
60.8, Charlie. You said?
63.8.
Ah, yeah, okay.
It's all the wrong way around. I can't show you the color. Oh, can I?
Here we go. Is this up?
I have a good.
You've got a better light there. Yeah.
I have a fairly white wall. So there you go.
Lovely, lovely deep color.
How's that? Is that all right?
And in Scotland, we still operate under candlelight. You see, it's got a gorgeous color. It comes from an American oak hogshead. It's got and even 63%. Actually, the beading. Where are we? The beading. Can you shake? You can see. Hopefully, you can see that the beading fades very quickly. So the indications are not terribly encouraging. But when you nose it, it is. Yeah, I mean it's surprisingly mellow.
I love this nose. I absolutely love this nose. May I start?
Please.
There are three elements here that are really popping out to me. Number one, campfire marshmallow. So if you leave, like, you forget for a second, you're telling a story, whatever, all of a sudden your marshmallow is completely black and dripping off of the end of the stick. That's what it smells like.
I know.
Secondly, like melted milk chocolate.
Whoa.
And third, smoked salami, like highly smoked salami. So I'm getting this sort of burnt marshmallow followed by melted milk chocolate, and that smoked salami is very, very strong throughout.
So basically a s'more with salami in it.
Basically a carnivore, yes, a carnivore s'more. That's right.
Carnivore s'more.
Yeah,
that's a great name.
That's actually a pretty good name, isn't it?
That's a great name.
That's not bad.
Ah, good. Yeah, we've got a title.
I'm going to bill you for that, Charlie. I mean, but now I'm starting to get a bit of the medicinal characteristics. So anyway, I'll leave it there and turn it over to you, Jenna.
I find that with these 16s, you know, when you have whiskeys that you nose and you can just pick it up like that, like you know exactly what it is, just because the nose is. There's not a nose like this, I find, in other whiskeys that I've had, and just in my experience. And I find that if you were to line these up, you know, in a blind tasting, you would be able to pick this out just because the nose is so robust, it's so meaty. And I find that these 16s really kind of take me to like a wet, damp, like camping in a wet, damp forest. Like in the Pacific Northwest, I'm in a wet, soggy, cold forest, and I'm like, we're cooking like tri-tip or something like over the open fire pit. It's like meaty, it's wet, it's damp, it's very like you smell the earth. I have loved these 16 so much, and I think the nose on this is just absolutely stunning.
My goodness! Wow,
love it.
What you think, Ben?
I think if we were doing this blind, I would probably peg this as an American single malt. I think it's a lot of mesquite smoke. I mean, the recharred hogshead is the cask, and I think the recharring, I think, carries through in the spirit right away. very masculine, very aggressive spirit. But the mesquite, it's a peated spirit. But I think the combination of the peats and this recharred hogshead together makes for this. I would say this is, for me, the American barbecue pairing.
Yes.
I think of a hot Texas summer.
Yes.
But this literally tastes like American barbecue. I mean, it's like American barbecue in your glass for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, but I think it's fantastic. It is so unique in the spectrum of Scotch whiskies. This is different than I think even from the Society's selections. This is very unique, and I enjoy it immensely.
Yeah, I love it. I love all you say. I was very impressed that although it's at high strength, I mean, I was doing some earlier tasting notes before lunch today. Yeah, so it's not that my palate is completely jaded tonight, or my nose. It's surprisingly mellow on the nose, in spite of its high strength. My top notes were sherried, and did I wonder whether it hadn't been the cask it's drawn from hadn't been sherry seasoned. But then oh yeah, and then there's a sort of a fleeting juicy note which I've got as fresh orange juice, a bit like your Jenna, your those reconstituted oranges, the little frozen tins that you reconstitute, which are lovely, by the way. But there's also some dried fruits and the uncrystallized orange peel, and a trace of toffee over time as the aroma develops. And only this is a peated whiskey apparently, but only a thread of smoke in as you smell harder and harder. It's a lovely rounded whiskey. I can smell the smoke now. I mean, to be honest, it's a more complex whiskey than the standard product of this sort of, in my view. I've got a note here: comfortable and comforting. I think there's a sort of nice, pleasant feeling about this whiskey.
Yeah, I think this is like a cold weather whiskey.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of, so here in Southern California, we have a cut of meat called tri-tip. I don't know if it's readily available throughout, the U.S. or abroad, but it reminds me of like that fatty grilled piece that has char on it, like the fatty piece of a steak, or just that's the best part of the whole grilled experience, is that big fatty piece. But that's what this reminds me of, and I definitely get that orange juice, like tangy, tart, like reduction on the finish of this. I find that like fresh orange juice note, and I love this whiskey so much.
Yeah, what do you call those steaks? What do you call them?
Tri-tip.
It's called tri-tip.
It's the bottom of the sirloin. It's the undercut. Of sirloin.
It's kind of like a cheaper cut of meat here.
But wait till you taste this.
So
wait till you have a sip straight. Even at 63.8, it's palatable. I'm going to put a little water in, but the smoke now.
Yeah,
and the meatiness. I mean, that's perfectly with your tri-tip steaks. Oh yeah.
So Jenna, I'm not sure if you've ever been up to. I'm sure you've been up to wine country, but the best tri-tip I ever had in the state of California, and I've had a little bit, but it's called Buster's Barbecue. It's on Route 29 in Napa, and if you're there, you got to check it out.
I mean, I am from Texas, so barbecue is in my blood.
Right on.
So
Well, it turns out
I will happily drive up there for it.
Buster is from the South. I'm not sure if anyone really knows where. He went on the lam for like 15 years, and then he just popped up in Napa Valley.
Nice.
So he could very well be from Texas. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like it's worth a drive.
But get up to Napa and check out Buster's Barbecue.
Buster's Barbecue. Thank you.
All right, so we're diluting.
Yep, we're diluting. I'm bringing my notes over here. It drinks well. At this stage in the evening, it's diluting it remarkably well. It's drinking remarkably well at natural strength. But
And for those of you still with us, 2 hours into this, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
oh, for goodness sake!
Time flies when you're analyzing.
Yeah, okay, so let's have a quick look at reduced. Yeah. It could take a lot of water, actually. It's remarkable how I'm gonna put some more of the,
I find with water, you get more of that smoked element.
You do.
Yeah,
It's extraordinary.
I'm finding just that it brings like the viscosity and the mouthfeel of it down a bit, but brings forward more of that smoked profile.
Yep.
The whole texture is open, is bigger, more mouthfeel, and you get a huge amount more smoke. Hessian, what do you call it? In America, it's burlap, isn't it? It's sackcloth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Burlap, yeah.
These, it's a really, it's a very, very nice. I won't go in my favourites this evening, but I think it's a very impressive whiskey.
Is anyone else picking up on this chocolate note? I mean, I'm definitely sensing it. Diluted a bit more with not as much as that sort of melted milk chocolate, but maybe a slightly darker thing. Am I imagining this, or is that?
I think
I'm not but I'm open to suggestion.
I mean, it's all what our palates are exposed to. We all pick
Right.
up different things, so.
And basically, I just eat chocolate and barbecue. So,
I guess there are worse things in the world than chocolate barbecue.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's get on to the last one,
Final one.
which is Cask. What is it?
Sample number 12.
Yep. This is bottling, SMWS bottling 53. It's from 2010, and it's bottled at 10 years old from a refill hogshead. The bottling strength, or the strength I have in my little sample bottle here, is 59.3. It's very pale. I was somewhat sort of scared by the color being very pale, Pinot Grigio wine sort of thing. But I know this distillery very well, and they invariably produce good goods, really. And this doesn't. It's a lovely example of the make. I was a bit nervous because the paleness. It obviously means that the casks are really hogshead, it says, but they haven't done a great deal in terms of maturing their content, the spirit. But then, of course, the quality of whiskey depends upon two things. The ideal matured spirit should retain the called the distillery character, the inherent original character from the individual distillery, and then kind of mellow it and develop it according to maturation. And really when the maturation characteristics, the so-called mature character, takes over the original character, the distillery character, it's not necessarily a very good thing. So when I noticed and tasted this, I was wonderfully impressed because it retains the distillery character to full advantage. Anyway, so let's have a look at it. So it's very pale with slightly green lights in the bottom. Beading is pretty good.
Oh boy, that sounds like a landline. You are a classic, Charlie. Yes, you are.
I don't have a landline.
Oh.
I'm in demand day and night.
Well, may I kick this
no,
off?
where were we? Sorry,
again, maybe it's just the
please.
the 6 samples talking, but I'm getting some pretty pronounced aromas here. When I first picked this up, I thought of Blanco tequila, like almost immediately. Is that weird? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
I'm getting, or maybe reposado. I mean, maybe, but there's definitely that sort of raw agave aspect to it. It's a touch of fresh soil, so definitely underpinnings of an earthier element, and then some really nice black pepper spice.
Yep. Well, yep. Carry on.
Maybe, I don't know. I could just be going crazy here. I don't know. Jenna?
I got something very different.
Yeah.
I found this to be like a sweet drawn butter with like a chlorine, briny seaweed, like a whisper to it. Like when I first smelled it, it was just like sweet drawn butter. Like you would put it like over like kettle corn or like a kettle corn drizzle or something that you would drizzle over your popcorn. That was the first thing I got. And I find that a lot. I think that's what I kind of associate this particular distillery with, is I find those like sweet, buttery type of notes. But there's definitely like a seaweed brine to this that I really love.
Yeah, for sure.
Ben?
I get like it's a cliche note, but a very creamy vanilla, or almost like a cake sort of icing. There's a confectionery sugar element there that I'm struggling to get past. And it's funny because this is a 6 whiskey. We've had 3. This is the third peat of whiskey, all very, very different. I think it's when you think of ILO, you think of the age less than 10 years. 10 years, yeah, exactly. And so it's 10 years and 3 months. And so you think, I would say this, it's more approachable than you would think at full strength. Just nosing it, it's not as prickly. Perhaps I'm a little warmed up after the first 5, but creamy vanilla, a bit of hay, dried hay, and that confectionery sugar notes that I can't seem to shake.
Well, I've got, this was probably the easiest one for me to describe. I need to fiddle with my, oh God, it's gone. It was more, it's a wonderful example of the of the make. But I've now lost my tasting notes. Where do I find my tasting notes? Hold on a second. And they agree with yours to a degree, but go further. I was very enthusiastic about this. The aroma is maritime, as I think you picked up, Janet. The maritime overall, crystal salt, rock pools, dry sand. That's what I wrote. But the top notes of green apple on a base of swimming baths, chlorinated water, a trace of carbolic, with just a whiff of scented smoke. So we are getting a slightly different smoky element to this whiskey on the nose. And I wrote appetizing, and I just simply say little change of reduced strength, maybe slightly smokier. A smooth, then in the mouth, a smooth texture and a fresh, sweet and salty taste with bags of smoke in the finish. Now you must agree with that. There's a big blast of smoke in the finish.
Absolutely.
Straight dash of water increases the saltiness and reduces the smokiness and introduces the warming spiciness to the finish. I think it's a lovely expression of this distillery. It really is, in my view. Sorry, have I gone on too long?
Don't be sorry at all, ever. No, that's great. I mean, we've enjoyed so many beautiful single casks from this particular distillery over the years, and they never seem to disappoint.
Indeed, they never disappoint. They never disappoint.
And I've heard from so many members that they really outperform the official bottlings, just head and shoulders above them. So
I think they probably do, actually. The ones that I've tasted, it's a very reliable. It's a very good. It really is a very reliable Islay whiskey.
This tastes like eating a big bucket of hot kettle corn on Islay. Sitting on the beach, butt in the sand, eating a giant just bucket of hot kettle corn.
Not to me.
That's it.
It is. I'm on the Sound of Islay, sailing down the Sound of Islay, and it's after lunch, and we just had a lobster lunch, and in fact this is a true story, because we'd eaten lobsters which had been picked up at the Port Ascade, and we were going down the Sound of Islay, and we'd had a couple of glasses of white wine with our lobsters, and then it was a gorgeous afternoon. We were with the tide, very strong tide down the Sound of Islay, and drinking this particular whiskey was just perfect in the sun, after lunch. Sorry, that's my. I feel I'm
right.
I'm completely dark. My candles over here have died. Anyway, look here. Any other questions? Any discussion?
Well, I was going to do another lightning round.
Midnight.
Everybody here has been to Islay, correct? All four of us have been to Islay. You
Of
haven't been to Islay yet. Oh my goodness.
I was supposed to go this year, and
We need to
then
remedy
the world
that.
ended. Yes.
Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. All right. Well, I will save that lightning round, Jenna, until you have visited.
All right. Fair enough.
But maybe actually this will be the lightning round. Recommendations for Jenna and anyone else who has yet to go to Islay for the best meal that you've had on the island of Islay. Who wants to start?
Well, not me.
Well, clearly not. No.
I think the
What's
kill
the best meal you'd like to have on Isla? Maybe kettle corn with your butt in the sand on the beach?
I think the Isla is famous for its seafood, and I think probably the best seafood is the Port Charlotte Hotel, where their prawns, their prawns. That be my, and indeed further, there's a peninsula down from Port Charlotte down called the I can't remember.
The Mull of Oa?
There's the O and the Rins of Isla.
Oh, the Rins, right. Yeah, the Mull
Down
is
at the bottom, there's this Port Nahaven, and they do. There's a pub there, which also has these prawns. I mean, wonderful. So you never find that quality of prawn anywhere else in Scotland, quite frankly.
Ben?
I really enjoy the Kill Home Cafe, which has since been renovated and probably expanded upon. But I just had a great experience. I think it was a tuna sandwich and some sort of chowder with. They serve coffee with new make in it. So can't remember what they call.
Wow.
I'll take one of those coffees, please.
Right.
You know, the phenolic spirit mixed with coffee is just but again, they've since renovated and expanded at Kilhome. I mean, they doubled their production facilities, and I think with it, it's a bit different. So I'm due for a visit.
Nice.
I
would say the Cullen Skink and lobster at the Bridgend Hotel. I always put the Bridgend, and maybe it's just because I'm driving around and I'm perpetually hungry. But yeah, I think Bridgend serves some wonderful food there, and if you're in the mood for something other than seafood, they have a delectable venison pot pie, which I ended up drinking with some festival unpeated bruichladdich, and that was pretty good. It was pretty good stuff. That was what I'd call a good day. So and here, so David Blackmore says scallops on the boat with Gus Newman. So that sounds like it's probably about as fresh a seafood experience as you could ever have. I imagine they're catching it and then cooking it right in front of you on a small barbecue or something. So, and a few more there. But yeah, so Jenna, you will get there. And when you get there, you will realize that it is one of the most magical places on this planet, hands down.
I've literally been dreaming of it for many years. So I look forward to the day that my feet hit the soil on that beautiful island. Yeah.
You may not want to go even back to America.
No, I've debated booking a one-way ticket many times. Actually, it's been a topic of conversation in our household.
Real estate is actually really expensive. We've looked. After I took my wife there, we were looking at houses, and it's actually pretty pricey.
Well, we're expert campers, so we'll have a nice tent on the coast. I'm good with that.
I have to admit, I've reached a new level of fanaticism for the island. Tom and I just had daughters recently, and mine bears the middle name of Isla as a token situation for this. So I think about it. I feel like I have to vote for this one, just out of the
yes.
Yeah.
So
it's a magical place.
Tom, do you want to just to recap how it's going to work next week?
Absolutely. So we've done all the heavy lifting here for you folks. It's been a very difficult way to spend 2 hours and change. But that's what we're here for, to help you, the society member. It's been a great time. I think we've tasted 6 really unique, really excellent whiskeys. And we're going to gather our tasting notes, give them to Charlie, and then over the course of the next few days, very much like what happens with our actual tasting panel, Charlie will be charged with the task of creating a title and a tasting note for these whiskeys. So that's going to happen in time for you all to receive an email from us on Thursday, the 22nd of October, a week from today. And on that email, you will be able to cast your vote for 3 of the 6 whiskeys. And once all of those votes are tallied, we will keep the polling open for a few days, so people have a chance to actually cast their vote. A bit of our own decision 2020, a bit more fun than the other stuff. So sorry, I shouldn't say that, but whatever. We've all done the tasting notes here, and you guys are going to see those next week. So it'll be up to you to decide which of these 6 whiskeys we actually send out to members across the country. Anything else you guys want to add?
This was a lot of fun.
It was fun. I wish we could do tasting panel experiences all the time.
I know.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
How many casks are being bottled for America?
In totality, or just for this, or
No, just for this.
Just for this. So for 2021, there will be 3 casks. We actually just had 3 casks published to our members over the course of the last 4 months for the work that we did last year, Charlie. Yep. So we had the 93.140 that was released in August. And then cask 3.315 that was released in September. And finally, so I guess it was the last 3 months, cask 30.111, which was released much earlier this month.
Yeah.
So those were the 3. We did them all by lottery to be as fair as possible. And yeah, everyone's loved it. So we look forward to doing this with you for years to come.
I hope so. Good.
And hopefully next year we can all shake hands and I can buy everybody a drink in person.
Yeah.
That would be cool. That would be nice.
Great. Good.
In the meantime, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And I think we're going to wrap up. Charlie, if you would stay in the studio with us, we'll have a quick debrief afterwards. But Ben, Jenna, if you have any parting shots.
Yes. So for all of our members out there, we will have our October mid-month Outturn preview tasting on Monday. So be sure to join us for that, for the smaller release that we'll be putting out for our mid-month Outturn.
Ben?
Yeah, just vote wisely. There's a lot at stake.
A lot at stake. So much at stake.
The deadline to register is
the future of our society.
I'm finding myself sitting here very opinionated and sort of pulling favorites, but no, I think it'll be interesting to see which, based on our just interactions and opinions here, which ones turn out the top 3. Last year they were all very, very close, so I'm looking forward to it. All good whiskeys, and quite frankly, I think if there's any criticism against it, it's just because we have to be, So
right. Great. And Charlie, any last thoughts from you?
No, it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you all. And I'm now completely pissed. Whereas you can't say that in America because it's a different thing. But it's been a lovely chat with you guys, and we'll send me your notes. I've got some here, and I've got my.
We certainly will. And if we choose any, this is what I said on the road, and I'll say it again. If we choose any titles from members who have submitted them, say in the chat, and we decide to actually go with that title, you will get a 6-pack of whiskey from me. So that's my standing invitation.
They will.
So anyone who's still hanging out, be sure to submit some titles.
Please come up, members who I'm talking to, come up with little titles if you can. It's so useful. Great idea. So,
That's great. All right. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for being with us again. And like I said,
All
just
right.
hang out, stay with us here, and everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to your feedback next week. Have a great day, and until next time, Slonjava.
Chris, Sláinte.
Cheers.
Sláinte, God bless.